in this people analytics space, I've done a lot of things, which really touched upon almost every stage of an employee's life cycle within a company. But one topic that is always very dear to my heart is the skills. As I firmly believe that we need keep refreshing our skills, given how fast the technology is evolving, right? And how quickly the companies are trying to catch up with all those changes. I'm sure you have heard the saying that skills is the new currency.
Yeah.
So, right? So all of us need to have the necessary skills to remain competitive in the market.
Hey Ying, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Nice
How are
to
you,
see
Chris?
Again. I'm good. I can't believe it's already March.
Yeah.
The year, exactly. It's already gone so fast. I don't know how the year's disappeared. How are things where you are?
Things been going pretty well. Had a busy start in January, but it's a little bit quiet in February, and now things are ramping up again.
Nice.
Yeah.
Before we jump in, tell everyone, you have such an interesting background. So tell everyone a little bit more about your background and then your journey to where we are now and the role at PepsiCo.
Yeah, happy to. Well, I would say that I have a very non-typical path to my current role as the head of people analytics at PepsiCo. I have a PhD in electrical engineering. And then I started my career as a research staff member at IBM TJ Watson Research Center, which is based in New York. Mm-hmm. So I spent 13 years there doing research in various areas, such as e-learning, computer vision, computational creativity, and then later on spanning into digital marketing and finance. So I did a lot of different things there.
That's a lot of different things.
Yes, that was really fun. And then I spent one brief year with IBM's Global Business Service Unit as a principal data scientist there. And after that, there was an opportunity to lead the data science team in the people analytics organization at corporate HR. So I just jumped on that opportunity, without knowing much about HR business at that point.
Yeah.
Well, I probably should say I knew nothing about HR at that point. Yeah, except that, we know HR tracks headcount, pays people, but that's all I know about HR at that point. Yes. So that's very interesting. But that now looking back, almost 8 years later, I was really grateful that I took that opportunity and transitioned into this people analytics space, because it's such a fascinating area. There's so much you can do with data and insights. Literally, the sky is the limit. I spent 5 years there leading the data science team at HR, at IBM's HR, people analytics. And my area mainly focused on developing advanced analytics and AI solutions to really help attract, retain, and develop our employees. So that was really good 5 years. I gained a lot of HR domain knowledge. I wouldn't say I knew everything about HR, but I did learn a lot about the HR business. And then I also used my technical skills to develop solutions that really touched upon people's lives, which really gave me a very profound sense of self-accomplishment in that perspective.
I love that.
So that role ultimately led to where I am now at PepsiCo, leading the people analytics team. Yeah.
What a great journey. It's so fascinating because this role didn't even exist, right? Until the last maybe 10 years.
That's right.
So you were really the first wave of people analytics lead. Imagine when we look back years from now, it'll be pretty cool to think that you were part of the first generation of people analytics leaders, right? When I started, it was HR analytics. Now, and then obviously people analytics, and it's kind of evolving. now, but that's pretty cool that you were part of that wave of innovation, and it continues now with the age of AI to only get even faster. And the things that we could do now, we kind of dreamed of 5 years ago. That's now.
That's right.
So I'm sure it must be really exciting. What's really top of mind for you right now? Because there's so many topics that me and you spoke about offhand, but where do you want to start really? What are you most excited about? What's really top of mind for you right now?
Yeah. So like in these, 8 years, in this people analytics space, I've done a lot of things, which really touched upon almost every stage of an employee's life cycle within a company, from talent acquisition to retention, engagement, development, performance management, right? The whole journey. But one topic that is always very dear to my heart is the skills. As I firmly believe that we need keep refreshing our skills, given how fast the technology is evolving, right? And how quickly the companies are trying to catch up with all those changes, right? I'm sure you have heard the saying that skills is the new currency.
Yeah.
So, right? So all of us need to have the necessary skills to remain competitive in the market.
Yeah.
So
let's start from the beginning then, because I know you're going to tell me the importance of the foundation. So let's start with the foundation, right?
Yes.
So, how do we understand people skills using data analytics and AI? Talk me through the foundation. How do we build that first?
So I'd like to comment on 4 different areas that kind of builds the foundations around skill, and that will really help build a skills-based organization. People have been talking a lot about skill-based or skills-powered organization, but really, we should start from the foundations. So one thing I think is very important is really to understand people's skills depth or skills, the level of their skills. When you talk to people, you will hear people say, oh, I have skills in machine learning, for instance. But it's really hard to know that are they, do they only know machine learning as a beginners? They probably just took a couple of courses and they think they have the skills of machine learning, right? Or they actually have a lot of experience of using machine learning in their jobs, have developed machine learning based solutions, right? Or some of them even could be, thought leader in the machine learning or AI space, right? So you could see there's a wide span of different levels or depth, for a particular skill, right? So, and knowing about people's level of skills is super, super important, to me, because that will really help us kind of plan on reskilling, upskilling people, right? How to match people's skills with the particular job positions, right? Especially internally. So that's why I think this is really one of the basic things that a company needs to really start with.
Yeah. How do you do that presently?
Yeah. So there are various ways to do that, especially using data analytics and AI technology. So let's start with what kind of data we want to tap into to understand people's depth, right? So generally speaking, you want to really tap into people's digital footprint within the company. So for instance, you want to look into the internal social network, like say Viva Engage or the Slack, where people, they communicate, they have the discussions, they talk about their work, they do the knowledge sharing, right? So they jump to the problem solving. So that definitely give you one aspect into what people know and how much they know about specific topics or specific things, right? And then you can also look into people's profile or resumes. I'm sure companies have resumes about their employees, maybe not 100% complete, but when you apply for the job or you got the job, you have the resumes in their database, right? And also in your learning platform, you have people's profiles there, right? So that's another data source you can look into. And also, look into their learning and training history. You can certainly see what courses people have taken, what other skills relate to those courses, right? What are the training programs they have, enrolled in. So that history is another good data source to look into. And then you have all the badges, certifications. That definitely speaks to people's skills, right? And then publications, patents, if you have R&Ds, right, you have research divisions, definitely that's another really, really good data source for you to look into to understand people's skills and their levels, right? And then other things are like performance assessment, project assessment. That's, again, another ways to understand people's skills and how good they are, right? Wow. So you have like all these, really a very diverse set of data you actually have within the company that you can really tap into to understand people's skills. And then you build like a machine learning model on all the data that you have, right? So the model can then eventually spit out kind of classifying people's skills into, let's say, from level 1 to level 5. Level 1 could mean entry level, and level 5 could be expert or thought leader. Right. So that's kind of, like very high level ways of really understand people's skill depth.
I love that. And I suppose because you're looking at it through the skills lens, you're finding skills across the business that perhaps you didn't know exist.
Correct. That's right.
And people, like you weren't in the HR function. You had the skills that were transferable to the people analytics role, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
How often do you do that? Do you do like a skills depth analysis? Is that what you do? Yeah. Is that what you'd even call it?
We call the skills inference. Oh, okay. So you can infer the skills, right?
Yeah. I've heard of inference, but does inference also mean depth? Because they're kind of two, or is that the same thing?
Not necessarily, but in this case, we are inferring people's level of skills. You can think that way, right? Okay. Yeah. And inference also gives you a sense that you have science behind it. You leverage the technology to infer, right? Infer from the data about people's skills levels. Yeah. So to your question, how often do we do it? It really depends. Depends on like your sense of how fast people's skills will change. I mean, people's skills do progress, right, over the time, but do you think they will change like on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, right, or, annual basis, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you certainly do not want to do it on a weekly basis, that's too frequent. You probably wouldn't see much change, but, maybe quarterly refresh makes more sense. Right. Mm-hmm. And then another aspect I want to point out is that the validation aspect. Chris, you might be kind of wondering, how do we know your inference result is correct and accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly my next question. That's essentially my next question.
So one way to do that is the validation piece, right? AI model will never spit out 100% accurate information, right? So there's definitely a validation phase. So, you could do like in various ways. One way is that you could, share back the inferred skill levels with the employees. And you can tell them, hey, Chris, here's the list of skills, we mined from all the digital footprint. And then here is the level of skills we inferred along each dimension of skills, right? Go take a look and tell us, whether you agree or disagree. And if you disagree, give us your self ratings, right? So that's kind of self-validation. And, it's good, you are making it transparent to employees because essentially you want to leverage these skills depth data for some downstream application, right? So you want to kind of make it transparent to employees so they know that you're actually using all the data and, for good reasons, right? Yeah. But the caveat of self-validation is that as an employee, I do not have like a big picture or global picture of who are the other people having, say, the machine learning skills in my company, and how my skills compare to other people's skills on the machine learning, right? You probably don't know everything. So you may feel very good about your own skills. I think I'm an expert on machine learning.
Yeah, that's what
right?
I mean. Yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah, right. You may not necessarily know. Actually, there are many people who have better, they have more deeper skills on machine learning than you are, right? So the AI model, has this global picture because we feed all the data about our employees into the model. So the AI model is sort of standing at much higher ground, if you will, right? So it can have, more fair assessment. So there's a pros and cons, I would say, to ask employees to self-validate their skills.
Are you just leading with trust? Are you just leading with trust at that point?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think there's definite merit there that you share back the data with the employees, have them have a voice, or
Yeah.
right, a voice, in this whole process. And you take their input with a grain of salt, right? Integrate with other information you have. So for instance, you can also ask their managers to validate their skills.
That's a good way. That makes sense.
Yeah, right. So you could have multiple sources coming to you, and then you can make a final decisions.
Do you have that as part of your skills-based talent marketplace? Do you feed the data from, or take data from there, and because I'm sure people are updating profiles within the talent marketplace as well?
Yeah. So for now, I would say PepsiCo is not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is more related to the work I did back at IBM, the skills inference work.
Okay.
Because there's another layer of foundation, because you need to have like a skills taxonomy
to be able to do that.
ready.
Yeah.
But yes, for doing the inference. Now at PepsiCo, we are on the journey to have that skills taxonomy. Actually, we call it global job architecture. And other people kind of frequently refers to that as well. So we are almost towards the end of building that job architecture. And once that's ready and launched, then we can do a lot more things on top of that, right? That's really level 0 of the foundation.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's something that many people miss that I speak to that don't have the experience that you have. There's no point having the talent marketplace if you don't have the skills taxonomy for the talent marketplace as well. What about, because I noticed you mentioned there's 4 things. I think the second one you mentioned to me was around skills scarcity. Could you talk about that and how you share the skills both within the organization and also make sure that you can leverage that across functions?
Yes. Skill scarcity is really about understanding how scarce the skill is, both within and outside of the company. You can consider this as like how rare, right, or how little these skills is in the market. Now, understanding skill scarcity is very important, especially when you want to decide on whether I need to buy, build, or borrow the skills, right? Let's say, now we need people who has machine learning skills, right? Now, if this skill is very rare or scarce in the market, then you probably have to pay a lot in order to hire that skills into a company, right? So in that case, you probably wonder, hey, maybe I will be better off just to build these skills within the company. I can do rescaling, I can do upscaling, right? So that might, be a cheaper solution, right? And then, or you may just want to go with the borrow option if that skills is only needed, for a short period of time, for instance, right? So that kind of definitely will be a factor that you need to consider about. And also understanding the skill scarcity can help you make a differentiated strategy. Let's say you have a product based, meaning that you will give salary raise to people that you want to retain, right? So now in this case, you have limited budget, and then you need to decide whom I really want to retain, right? Now, if skills is very important to you, then definitely you want to retain people who have the skills, which will be hard to hire from the market, right? So then the skill scarcity index, if you will become a key component when you decide or prioritize whom to retain, right? And even with what is the percentage of salary raise, that's all related.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
So when you, I know that was a question for later, but then maybe we could touch on it now.
Yeah.
Like, so when you feel about linking skills to compensation, part of that is through the skills scarcity and analyzing that and understanding these are the skills that we need to retain. Therefore, we're going to adjust our compensation for that.
Exactly. Yeah. So compensation. Yeah. So another retention, salary increase. That's a part of the compensation. But separately, you have this annual salary planning, right? Where you do the merit increase to the employees, and then based on your compensation philosophy. I guess most of companies probably is performance-based compensation philosophy. But if you have this skills-based compensation philosophy, then you would want to invest in employees who have those essential skills to the company, right? Now, how do you define those essential skills? And then definitely the skill scarcity is one key element there, right? I want to invest. And essentially, you want to retain those people within the company, as well.
What we haven't spoke about yet is skill agility, and what people's propensity is to learn. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I'm not sure, Chris. Have you ever heard people talk about skills agility, the propensity to learn in all your podcasts?
Not that much. A little, but not enough.
Okay.
a little bit. Yeah. Mainly from the chief learning officers that I interview. Less so from the people analytics or the CHROs.
Yeah. Okay. I guess because of my background in data analytics, people analytics, so I tend to approach to those topics from more analytical way. But, as you can imagine that we do collaborate with, with all the COEs, like learnings, skills, talent management, right, to work on that. So skills agility is exactly the topic that we kind of co-explode with our learning team. People, we always say curiosity is a great trait, right? But how do we quantify people's curiosity? It's a little bit subjective, I would say, right? But then understanding people's curiosity or their propensity to learn is actually very important. When you think about the skills planning, let's say you have a reskilling program, you want to have more people have the skills in cloud computing space, right? Now, let's say you have 2 weeks of reskilling program, but you only have 20 seats, right? But then let's say you have 100 people who are qualified for this workshop. Then it comes to the selection problem, right? Who are those 20 people that you want to select out of these 100 candidates? Right? Now, of course, there are many factors you can consider in prioritization, but one element could be their skills agility. You do want to reskill people who have a high propensity to learn and who are more eager to learn new skills, to apply the new skills into their job, right? So that will actually will lead to a higher success rate.
Of course, yeah.
From the reskilling program. Not everyone will graduate from the reskilling programs, right? Some may drop, some may just forget about the new skills they learned, right? If they do not apply them in their daily jobs, right? So now that's kind of where the agility aspect will become important.
How do you measure for that? What are some of the key data points?
Yeah, great question. Actually, we tapped into many different data points. So for instance, one is you want to look at the growth of their skills over the time. we talked about the skills depth.
Yeah.
So you can further see for their existing skills, how their skill levels have been progressing over the time, because you need to invest in yourself in order to improve your skill levels, right? So that's like one aspect into people's propensity to learn. And then now we can also see, are they gaining new skills over the time? That's another great element to look into.
That also
right?
shows the curiosity, right?
Exactly.
To look beyond and
Yes.
seek different types of skills. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And you also want to look at, are those new skills aligned with the company's strategic directions? I mean, people could be interested in many different things, but not all of them are important for the job, important for the company, right? So, to some extent, you can also look at, like, are those, the hot skills or key skills that are advocated by the company. Back at IBM, we have all this list of hot skills or strategic skills. It's like very well clearly defined, so you can easily see how people's skills aligned with that hot list.
Was that also shared with the employees?
Yes.
So they knew, hey, these are the skills that are in demand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it's all transparent, and even for each learning course, it's tagged with, hey, this learning course will help you gain skills in these hot skills. So it's everything's very clearly communicated. People know exactly what skills they are, building.
Yeah. How I know you're going through the process right now with PepsiCo, but have you looked at skills adjacency in the past? Because obviously you've got similar skills. It could be machine learning, it could be called data mining, etc., data encryption. You end up having 20,000 skills in there. How have you approached that to making sure that your skills taxonomy, you're not duplicating things?
Yeah, that's another great question. So I guess, again, that goes back to the skills taxonomy, right? I mean, skills taxonomy needs to be refreshed over the time, because now the company with the new strategic direction, you may have new skills added to the repository. So that's definitely need to be like refreshed on a periodic basis, so that you have new skills to be added, and then probably some skills become obsolete. So you want to clean them out as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What have you found to be the best approach? Like, some leaders, your peers that I spoke to, have like gone to the actual teams in those functions and asked them specifically what are the skills, and then mapped it out that way by literally being hands-on. Like there's so many different ways. There's existing skills taxonomies that you can kind of start with that are predefined. Like, what have you found as the best way to define this and make it as small as possible, of course, and not have too many adjacent ones?
So, yeah, great question, and a very practical question. So back at IBM, at that point, we had a career and skills team. And we actually have had multiple career and skills team, supporting different business units. So those teams, they were very close to the business unit. They know exactly what were the skills required to support all those business growth. And those people, they really help with like keeping the skills taxonomy up to date, clean out those obsolete ones, including new ones, right? So that's kind of how it was done at that point at IBM. Now with PepsiCo, as I said, we are still building this global job architecture, and we involved a lot of domain experts from different functions, and they kind of helped work together to define the list of taxonomies, skills for the taxonomy. But you could imagine it's pretty manual.
Yeah,
and I would say, once the initial version of the job architecture is built, now for refresh purpose, we can definitely leverage the analytics and AI technology. We can look into all the digital footprint, like I mentioned earlier, and we can kind of identify the new skills that are popping up, and then and see, less frequent mention about, certain other skills. And we can kind of use that information to update and refresh the skills taxonomy, on a periodic basis. But of course, with the human supervisions.
Yeah.
So I think that might be a better way, to save the cost and energy and effort, right?
Yeah. I'm wondering, I was speaking to Arist. Do you know Arist, the company, the LXP platform? Do you know them?
No.
No. So they're like an AI. They create learning pathways and courses using AI. And one of the cool features they have is that the AI will message all of your employees inside of Teams and Slack and ask you what your challenges are. And based on the collective challenges, it will go and build the AI learning pathways specifically. So it goes out and does that. It will go to your sales experts, your R&D experts, and it will basically ask questions. And based on that, then it will go and build the learning pathways based around the skills that they also need to acquire. So I'm wondering if there's ever going to be, if there's already a solution that does this, where you could do the same thing, where you can ask employees around questions around their skills, and within Teams, within Slack, whatever systems you use, and then the AI can then bring all of that information back and then start to build some of the skills taxonomy with that information. I don't know if that even makes sense. I've just kind of just threw that out there. Because it kind of goes back to your point of trust, because you're trusting they're gonna say the right things and assess them. But it could be cool to do that very fast.
That's very interesting ideas. So it's basically you pull all the information actively and then build on that knowledge. I wonder, ideally that's a great way of building, these learning pathways or getting the skills related information. But I wonder, what is the response rate,
Well, they were talking like 80%. Response
80%?
Rate because and the main reason is because it's already popping up in your Teams chat, or it's popping up in your Slack, right? So it's in the flow of your work, and it'll just ask you, and it'll ask you simple questions like, in there. And because the employees are using those tools every single day, you can do it in text message, your WhatsApp, whatever you want. They don't even have their own app. It all happens inside of the existing ecosystem. I think that's why the engagement's so high.
I love that point. That's right. So it's integrated into your workflow, so you do not need to make extra effort to log into a learning platform and then fill out my profiles.
So it's an interesting thing. and it's all AI. It's voice enabled, so you can say, hey, I'm looking to understand who in our organization has these skills, and you're just talking to that agent, and then it just goes and asks the employee population, and then comes it back in real time and gives you, think about the speed of being able to collect that information. So it's just interesting. It'd be interesting to see if we can, as we become more of a skills-based organizations, how we can leverage AI to almost do like an AI poll, a survey quickly to see the skills that exist. It's going to be fun to see how it evolves.
That's right. Yeah. And that will also help you understand how the whole skills landscape is kind of training or evolving over the time.
Interesting. I want to talk before we wrap up a little bit about, we spoke obviously about skills-based organizations, but one of the things that you pointed out to me, which was really interesting, is how you break down the skills-based organization and the different layers that is composed of. So could you talk a little bit more about that? Because you talk about skills-based retention and skills-based mobility and strategic workforce planning. I love the way you think about this. Could you share a bit more about that?
Yeah. So, people have been kind of really talking about skill-based organization, right? Now, what exactly that means, right? You could say, hey, we really, we really value people's skills, but how do you actually leverage that, right, to help build, high-performing organizations? So the way I kind of approach to it is that I think there are many elements related to building that skill-based organization, like skill-based hiring, right? People have been talking about it, and But what exact that means, companies have been thinking that, hey, now for certain job roles or job positions, we no longer need or require these 4-year college, credentials. It's all skill based. I mean, that's a great direction, but how exactly from operationalization perspective, right? Because, when you require 4 years college degree, you kind of assume that people have certain skills, which they gained over this 4 years period, right? Now, without that requirement, how do you assess or test that they actually had those skills, right? So that kind of relates to the skills, the assessment or pre-hiring assessment, right? So all those nuances need to be kind of thought out before it can actually be, launch that skill, right? And then, of course, skill-based strategic workforce planning and development. I mean, strategic workforce planning is not a new thing. People have been talking about all the time. But I would say maybe a lot of companies at this point are still kind of, not really leveraging very advanced technology to do that workforce planning or workforce management. Probably some of them probably still have like Excels, to help plan the headcount out. But really, I think an ideal workforce planning strategy would, really tap into the skills, what is the demand of the skills for oncoming work, oncoming requirement, or any promising contract sales deals, right? Sure. In view, and then you look at your skills inventory. What are the supplies that we have on the skills, right? And then you do kind of that matching. But then you also need to think about, the hiring as another talent inflow element, and you need to think about the attritions. So there are actually many elements you need to think through when you come to this picture of workforce planning. And the skills, again, it's very important, right? That's kind of the foundation there.
Yeah.
And development, we've talked a lot, scaling, upscaling, right? And then the other element is the skill-based internal mobility. I've listened to a couple of your audio podcasts, which touches upon the internal career mobility, the talent marketplace within the company, right? I mean, yes, if you have a vendor coming to provide you this talent marketplace, they are probably already doing that skill-based matching. You have this profile, you have this job position, they will try to match you, right, with the opportunities. But again, if you have these foundations set up within the company, the skills depth, right? Their skills agility, right? You even know the skills adjacency, which kind of understands how similar those skills are. So you can actually feed all those additional informations, into that vendor platform. And that definitely will help improve the quality of the matchings, matching people with the internal job opportunities. So I think that's another kind of applications, if you will, or pillars within, to build a skills-based organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a lot of information for people to take in. And I'd love to ask you advice of, for anyone listening, what would be your advice for them of where they should start? Because there's a lot, they could start with they might be thinking, I should start with schools-based retention, or I should start with schools-based hiring. It can get, it could get a bit, overwhelming. What would be your advice on where to start?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. I would say let's build this level 0 foundation first. Definitely you need this skills taxonomy, your own skills taxonomy, or the global job architecture, however you call it, right? So what are the skills that you expect to have, for the company. And so that's kind of the level step 1. Now, step 2 is I really think the skills depth is very important, the skills influence part.
Mm-hmm.
You want to understand, because usually the skills taxonomy only give you, here's a list of skills.
Yeah.
It does not really indicate your proficiency or however you call it, right? Along each skills. And many companies at this point rely on the self-assessment. I mean, they do ask you to rate yourself, skill level 7, 8, whatever. But, think about that. It's it's subjective.
Everyone's going to be like, I'm great.
Right. You would assume so, right? Yeah. But B, the completion rate. You cannot expect too high completion rate.
Oh, of course, because you're
right. Yeah, not everyone will log on to the system or the platform and give them the ratings. So it's really incomplete, and it could be obsolete. People's skills, they progress over the time. So I definitely kind of consider a way to leverage data analytics, AI technology to kind of really understand people's level of skills. I think that's very important, because that's kind of the cornerstone of doing many other things, like reskillings, upskillings, even for skills-based compensation and retention, because that kind of can all play a role in there.
Yeah. No, that was great advice. What do you think the consequences are going to be for companies that don't adopt this and don't move towards becoming a skills-based organization? What do you think the challenges or consequences they're going to face?
The consequence, I mean, for one thing, if the company kind of treats everyone the same, as long as you say you have that skills, I don't differentiate them based on the depth of the skills, then attrition could be the top one consequence. People with high level of skills feel they are not really valued, right? You don't really value my level of expertise, right? Now we said skills is the new currency. Hey, I have these valuable skills. I'm the expert on this topic. And, there's a great demand in the market. Why would I want to stay in my current company, right? So voluntary attrition would be, the top one consequence, I would say.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, to be quite frank, it's one of the reasons I left my last company. Because I was I'm constantly upskilling and learning new skills, and I was like, I was stuck in the same job for 10 years. 10 years, same exact role. And I was like, I can't, I'm not growing or developing, let alone, it was less about the money to me and more about the growth and development that I feel like that I wasn't experiencing. I was like, I'll work in any other part of the business. I just want to be able to grow and develop and learn. Yes, I want to be compensated, but that wasn't my number one driver. It was secondary to that. What about for the business itself? In terms of like, would this be in terms of the innovation and the ability for the company to remain competitive? Would that be a challenge?
Let's say, I would say yes, everything is kind of related, right? If we continue on this attrition, if you lose top talent, then, that definitely will have an impact on your business, on business growth. Now, on the other hand, if you want to hide that skills back to a company,
a lot more expensive.
Then that's right. That goes back to the skill scarcity, right? Yeah. Usually those people who leave the company have the skills in high demand, right? So if you want to hire back, then you have to pay more, right? So definitely that's not a wise decision to do that. And then going back to your point of innovation, right? Happy employees, they are more engaged. I would say, if you feel that you are valued in the company, I think you tend to be more engaged, you will thrive. And that definitely will have, it's hard to measure, but definitely will have a positive impact or influence, on the innovation side, right? They feel very encouraged and feel valued to be creative, right? To try new things. And that also goes back to, the development aspect, right? The growth mindset. So I think, yeah, everything is kind of connected in this case.
No, I
You
agree.
know, and development is definitely another very important aspect. You know, every company literally they are saying, you know, we focus very much on employees development, but how exactly you are doing that, right?
But then, because
It's just,
you got two levels though. You can be developing employees, but then they have no opportunities and they'll still leave. Right. So there's like, so I've seen companies invest in development, and they're like, great, I've put the time in, I've upskilled, I've commitment, but there's no
yes,
opportunity.
yes,
So you basically
yeah,
upskill me and then I just leave. So
yeah,
there's a second
yeah,
part,
yeah.
part to it.
That's a great point, Chris. And that actually also linked to the culture of the company. You know, let's say I upskilled myself, reskilled myself. I want to move on to a new position. Now, because we actually touch upon that. There's ascending managers, receiving managers.
Yeah, like talent hoarders versus talent exporters, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I was, right? You know, so like it was less of more that there wasn't opportunities. It was more the culture of the business was we hold on to talent.
Yeah.
We don't let them
Yeah.
go. You know, there was no such thing as sort of gig economy or, you know, working on specific projects. It was like you're here, you're in sales, you stay here.
Yeah. Yes.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yes.
As well. So there's going to be a cultural, as much, if not more, in my opinion, a cultural shift than it
That's
is
right.
anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can have the best technology or talent marketplace in the world, it doesn't matter unless you
Exactly.
have that
Yeah.
change in mindset.
Yes. Yeah.
As well. What do you? Last question. In the next sort of 5 years, what do you think the biggest role that people analytics is going to play when it comes to skills?
That's a great question. I've never thought about it. Um, what is the biggest role people analytics can play in these on these skills? Probably is to kind of, I mean, it's already happening, but you know, it's still a journey, which is kind of the recommendation aspect, right? So we know that you have all these skills with this level, you know, with these proficiency levels, but now what's next, right? Sometimes employees, they do want to keep learning, but they may not necessarily know what exactly I want to learn. So
Yeah.
I stay current, I stay essential to the company's growth, right? So, you know, I mentioned that IBM has this list of hard skills, defined, well defined, but not every company has that well defined, where, you know, carved out. So employees wants to know what's next. So that's kind of the opportunity people analytics can play, right? You know, it's kind of the push. We give you customized recommendation, and that can also, the recommendation can also be built around our internal opportunities.
Yeah,
You know, like
I love
going
that.
back to your point, right? You know, we could recommend you, hey, it seems that you have some relevant skills in the cloud computing. Why don't you learn this and that, which can, you know, make you like an expert in this space? But what about a company that doesn't have any openings, right?
The end of that needs to be,
Exactly,
yeah.
because ultimately you want people to advance their careers, right? So keep that end goal in mind. So you want to recommend some skills for people to learn, which can end up with, you know, open opportunities
Well,
within
that's
the
where the
company.
outcome piece comes as well, right? Because it's like I can take
Exactly.
all the courses in the world, but doesn't mean that's helping the business. Now, what is the outcome?
Exactly.
Because we're kind of measuring the wrong thing at that point. Just because we're measuring that someone took all of these courses doesn't mean it's actually having an impact on the business.
Yeah.
Or it's being applied. Let's say.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So that's a really great point. I forgot to mention earlier, which is, you know, skills. We talk about skills agility, right? Now, how does ultimately help people? You know, you want to kind of correlate with that. Hey, after I reskilled myself, did I actually move on to a different role where I can leverage or apply these new skills? That's kind of the outcome you want to measure.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's going to lead to retention, like you said earlier, and all the other things
That's
along the
right.
way. Well, listen, we could talk about this forever, but I know I have to let you go at some point. But Ying, I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been so fun, and I know this is going to be really helpful for our audience. So I appreciate you taking the time out, and I wish you all the best until next week.
Thank you, Chris. Well, thank you for having me. It was a really interesting discussion.
All the best.
Yeah.